On today's Locked On Texans podcast, is Carolina still dreaming of CJ? I dream of quarterback. A dozen games into the season, we look at improvements through this year compared to last season and the importance of winning out.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this Hump Days episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. To all of our first-time listeners or subscribers and viewers, thank you for checking out today's show. If this is your first time, be sure to hit that subscribe button, like, and comment on the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And to all of our returning listeners, lending your ear for another episode as Cody and I talk Texans. Thank you for coming back. I'm your Texans football analyst, John Some Sports Guy Hickman, joined as always by Texans credentialed media member, Sports Illustrated's own, the man with the plan.
Yes, sir.
If you want to know what's going on, follow him on Twitter at Cody Davis _24. Joining me, like I said, is Cody Davis. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. The easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code in all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first-time deposit match up to $100. Carolina, some people dream of Genie. Carolina is still dreaming of the quarterback that they presumably wanted all of a sudden in CJ Stroud. So we'll kind of play around with that at the end of the show. Kind of looking at where the Houston Texans are this year compared to last year. I think that's an important conversation when we look at the win total improvements. But this is a much improved team, and I think we're kind of overlooking how good this team is now compared to the last couple of seasons. So we'll get to that. Cody, we open up today's show looking at the importance of winning out. We had a graphic, couldn't get it up for you guys. However, the Texans now have a 46% chance to make the playoffs. The Texans can lose to the Browns and one game to the Titans and still have a 79% chance to make the playoffs. If the Texans lose to the Broncos and Browns, they have a 54% chance to make the playoffs. If they lose to the Browns, Titans, and Jets, it's a 28% chance to make the playoffs. If they lose to the Colts, Browns, and Jets, 7% chance. Cody, we're looking at how important it is for this team to win out.
Yeah, first and foremost, let's just start by looking at the entire AFC standing as of right now. I'm only going to look at teams 1 through 9, but it goes as follows. Baltimore, Kansas City, Jacksonville, Miami, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Indianapolis. Those are your top 7, followed by Houston and Denver are the last 2 teams on the bubble. And of course, if you want to extend it just a little bit further to 10 and 11, Buffalo and Cincinnati. This is going to shape out to be a very interesting and very competitive last 6 games of the 2023 campaign. First and foremost, when you talk about improvements that the Houston Texans have made so far this season, the fact that they are in the midst of a playoff run, the fact that they are on the bubble of the playoffs says a lot about the improvements that this team made. However, John, with 6 games left starting Sunday, the Texans will square off against Denver, New York, Tennessee twice, Cleveland, and Indianapolis. And I think that game against Indianapolis, just like last year, will have a lot of meaning. But unlike 2 tanking teams, they're going to be 2 teams fighting for the playoffs. But I don't know if they're able to get hot and go on a 6-game win streak. That would be nice. However, John, when I look at these last 6 games and you look at the possibility of them winning out, I think realistically, I got them at 4-2. I think there's at least 2 more games that they're going to lose, but they have to make sure that they squeeze out 4 more wins to control their own destiny. And look, listen to this. There is still a slim chance that they could still possibly win the division despite losing against Jacksonville, depending on what Jacksonville does in the last 6 games of the season. But, you know, I'm saying it like this. I'm not going to tell you guys which teams I got them losing to. which teams I think they can beat. But you look evil right now, by the way, especially with the red light. But they have to find a way to win 4 more games. D'Amico, CJ, Tank, Bobby Slowick, I believe in you guys. Let's do it.
I'm gonna tell you why I'm laughing. If the Texans go 10-6 in year 1 under D'Amico,
oh my gosh!
After only winning 3 games last year, 4 games before that, 4 games before that, was a total of 11 games in a 3-year span.
Yes.
If they win 10 games this year, you talk about maybe the greatest turnaround that doesn't lead immediately to a championship.
You ain't lying about that.
Maybe the NFL have seen in the past 2 decades. I can't think of every team that may have had great turnarounds. But I don't know how many teams have to go through what this franchise has went through. Like, they shouldn't have even been in the turnaround process to begin with.
Yeah, it's true.
And they had to go through it, and it had all kind of legalities that we don't even want to talk about no more. Then you had 2 botched head coaching searches back to back. You would have thought David Tepper was the owner. Boy, I can't wait to talk about that. But the importance of winning out for Houston, it's everything. It is everything. They have players in their locker room. Jimmy Ward has experienced playoff success. You got players like a Denzel Perryman who has experienced some playoff success.
Sheldon Rankins,
who has experienced playoff success. Robert Woods, who has experienced Super Bowl success. Dalton Schultz, right? So you got to mix a group of those guys. But then you got Laramie Tunsil, who only has went to the playoffs once. Then you got Titus Howard, who hasn't had any real playoff opportunities outside of the 2019 season, I believe. And then you got guys here that don't have the amount of playoff experience or success as some of the guys that were brought in during the offseason. So you got a combination of those guys in the locker room. And football players always talk about the good moments. And the playoffs comes up. And this is a franchise where maybe nationally it wasn't a thought. We know it wasn't a thought nationally, right? And I even think locally it wasn't a real thought for a lot of people. But this is a team that has a chance in year 1 under D'Amico, year 1 under CJ, right? A lot of year 1s here got a chance to make the playoffs after, 2 4-4 seasons and a 3-13-1 season. The importance of winning games is huge for Houston. And Cody, I'll take it a step further. Not only is it important for Houston to win these games, it's important for Houston to win certain games. So I'm looking at the Texans schedule right now. They are the 8th seed in the AFC. They take on the Broncos Sunday. That's I think that's a must-win game. The Broncos are right there. They're neck and neck with you guys. You beat them. That's the tiebreaker that you hold over them. So if you guys end the season 10-7, same record, well, you got the tiebreaker over them. That's an important must-win game in terms of winning out. And all of these games are must-wins. But the Jets, I think that's, again, a game where that's a must-win. But the Jets aren't making the playoffs. So if Houston drops to the Jets, I'm not as concerned. But the Titans must win. The Browns also in the playoff running. That's a must win. The Titans, again, you win the 2 Titan games and beat the Colts. If you and the Jaguars end the season with the same record, that gives you the division if you knock off the Titans and Colts. So these are all important games. And I still think that we probably, for some of us, are looking at how Houston can kind of just get into the playoffs as a 7 seed. No, they still have a chance to win this division, guys. And it's going to come down to taking care of the teams that you need to take care of. In the next 5 or 6 games, however many games they got left, this is the stretch where you cannot have a Carolina Panther mishap. You can't have a Falcons mishap. You got to beat the teams you're supposed to beat. You have to beat a Browns team that may not have Myles Garrett in a couple of weeks, won't have Deshaun Watson, and as of right now, we don't know if it's going to be DTR or PJ Walker at quarterback. So you got to beat that team. You're going to go into that team basically set up better than what the Browns are outside of defensively. But with no Myles Garrett, that makes your job a little bit easier from an offensive line that's also banged up right now. That's a must-win game. Titans are must-win games. And the Colts is a game that I think a lot of people may be overlooking because Houston got hot. But that's still going to be a tough game for Houston. The Colts are no slouch right now. They're finding ways to gut out wins. And when they close out this season, that may very well be the game that comes down to the wire to determine whether or not Houston can win the division. The next couple of games, the next few weeks are going to be very interesting for this team. And I'm expecting the best from Bobby Slug. I'm expecting the best from DeMeco Ryans, who has that. He knows what that playoff feel feels like. He's bringing it to this team. They gotta close out strong. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, daily fantasy sports is something that's super popular in America. But right now, I don't think nobody is messing with PrizePicks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. The easiest and the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It heightens the games. I'll be at the edge of my couch watching some of these games. I might be at the stadium looking at my phone, checking to see what's going on because PrizePicks is exciting and it's super easy. I'm not thinking a lot. I'm just picking the more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections. I sit back and I watch the winnings roll in, but I'm not really sitting back because I'm at the edge of my seat for real. And then now with the basketball season here, you guys can look at the options for the combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League, a league created specifically for combo projections. That includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, Jalen Green and Tank Dell. Well, they have a combination of 10.5 3-pointers made and receptions. Or you can play alongside some of PrizePicks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and be a boss, or comedian Andrew Schultz and laugh all the way to the bank. You can now find community plays under the promo tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the PrizePicks community. Don't sit around. Don't wait. Go to PrizePicks.com or use your phone. We all got a phone. Mine's right here. Go to the App Store, download PrizePicks. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKED NFL for a first-time deposit match up to $100. And whenever you watch those winnings roll in from PrizePicks, take a couple of that money. Go on and download the DoorDash app if you haven't already. And if you have downloaded the DoorDash app, listen. Right now, DoorDash is giving you guys 50% off up to a $10 value order when you spend $15 or more on your first order. When you download the DoorDash app, just enter promo code LOCKED23. That's LOCKED23. Sometimes, let's be real with each other, right? America has made us lazy, and we work a lot. I work a lot. Cody works a lot. Sometimes you just want to go straight home. Sometimes you don't want to leave the couch while watching the game. Sometimes you don't want to leave the house. You just want to watch sports in peace, but you still got to eat. You're still thinking of your favorite wing spot, right? And you want it right now. DoorDash is the place to be, I'm guessing, right? No, I'm not guessing. I'm telling you guys. And then the best thing about DoorDash, which is probably my favorite view from it, not view, but my favorite aspect of it, they allow you to order from local restaurants. So a lot of people have places like here in the city of Houston that you just absolutely love. It's not a corporation. It's a local spot. Like me personally, on Sundays, I like the DoorDash brunch from Kid Creole Kitchen out here in Humble. They're great, and you can do that. Local spots are on DoorDash. So, again, download the DoorDash app and get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order by using promo code LOCKED23, LOCKED23.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this Wednesday installment of Locked On Texans. Before we switch over talking about the improvements that the Texans made over the first 12 games of the season, John, I want to double back and ask you something. What is the trust level that we have in the Texans actually doing what they have to do and getting into the playoffs? And I only say that because the one trend that I've started to notice about this team throughout this whole entire year is this. They either play up or down to the level of the competition.
Carolina, Atlanta.
And not only that, it seems like where if there is a certain type of challenge, that's when we see the best version of this team, i.e. the games against the Steelers, the Saints, the Buccaneers. A lot of people going into that game, including myself, kind of question whether or not CJ will have an opportunity to thrive against three of the top defensive-minded coaches of this generation. And he went out and put on a show, especially Tampa Bay. It was the victory against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that gave him MVP consideration. And then there's games where we say, you know what, without a shadow of a doubt, the Houston Texans should win this game pretty easy. And then they end up losing. Atlanta, Carolina. I do wonder what is the trust level here with the Texans as of right now. There's no shot at the team or anything like that. But when I look at these games outside of the Denver Broncos, given the fact that this is going to be their quote unquote first nationally televised game in over the last couple of years, it's like I really don't know if there is a certain challenge within these last couple of games. And it's just a trend. It's just a trend.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very fair question before we look at the improvements of this team. And I think they kind of go hand in hand. But I think for me, the trust level is at a 6. He can keep the leaders out here in Houston now. So I would just, in my opinion, I'd rate it a 6.2 out of 10. God bless. But I think that's fair because they've dropped games that they should have won. And not only have they dropped games that they should have won, I think it's how they've lost those games. The Falcons or the Panthers did nothing, especially the Carolina Panthers, where they got after the quarterback 6 times, sacked 6 times. They did nothing brilliant. They did nothing creative. They did nothing outstanding. They didn't do anything to stand out, because if they did, the Texans would have not lost those games by a combined score, 5 points between the two? So I look at this team right now. They got out of the three games, that I would say, well, you know what? These were the games where Houston probably played down. They only won one game. That's the Arizona Cardinals game. Those 2 games, I'm sorry, is how they lost. Bobby Slowick, the questionable play calling, the flatness of the offense coming out in those games, and then not just being able to close out and defensively. And I kind of give credit to the defense, because I believe in both of those games, the defense probably was gassed, especially maybe the Atlanta Falcon game. They got to earn the trust. Now, they believe it themselves, because if they didn't, they wouldn't have won 6 games on the season. They know that they should have won those 2 games. They know that the playoff picture should look a whole lot different right now. But from the outside looking in, which no matter how much we're in the locker room, no matter how much we're in the post-press gun, from the outside looking in, is the trust there? 6.5 out of 10.
That's fair.
And I think that's fair based off of how they've lost the games that they've lost. And I'd even go back to the first game of the year against the Ravens. The Ravens didn't do anything spectacular that game. They just won. And Houston had moments to win that game.
Well, with that being said, we're going to transition over and look at the improvements that we have seen over the first 12 games of the season. John, if I could go first, man, I just want to give, even though there's been times where I do question the play calls, we have done it this whole entire week, given the result. You literally just did it like less than 2 minutes ago. But when I take a look at the major improvements that I've seen out of this franchise over the first 12 games, man, it's this coaching staff. And it's not just, restoring the faith, making sure that you put guys in position. It's something that I've been talking about a lot here on this show ever since week 2 when they lost against the Indianapolis Colts, but we saw how explosive that offense was in the second half. It's just the fact that this is a coaching staff that listens to their players and they're working together. And I know a lot of times I use the example of the Bill O'Brien years where it was like his way or the highway, but it was like that with Lovie Smith as well. There were several players who was hoping on the defensive side of the ball to upgrade your Tampa 2 defense. Stop using the Tampa 2 defense. It was so much confusion and confliction going on between Lovie Smith and some of these players and giving away how he was calling these games. Remember, even though the Houston Texans only won 3 games last year, a lot of those losses was 1-score losses. And this is a situation where, hey, if Lovie Smith had listened to player A and player B and changed up his defense, maybe, just maybe, the Houston Texans would have won more than 3 games, especially considering, like I just said, a handful of those losses was 1-score losses. I look at this year and I go back to one of my favorite moments of the season. Tank Dell, what changed in the second half for you? I told Bobby Sloyd I was noticing this in the first half. I said, let's do X, Y, and Z. And he did it. And next thing you know, the offense get explosive. I know a lot of people out there might hear that and think to themselves, players and coaches working together may not be a big thing, but it is, especially with this franchise where you had not 1, but 2 regimes where we look back and heard, man, this is the only thing that the coach wanted to do. This is the only thing that the player wanted to do, and it did not work. And it's part of the reason why the Texans had to go through a rebuild like that. Yeah. This alone, look, I know we can talk about CJ and the players and all this and other good stuff, but just knowing that this coaching staff has succeeded to expectations like this, it gets me excited.
Yeah, and you know what? I do want to say before I even get to, I think, the biggest improvement for Houston. The biggest improvement is definitely
coaching.
No, it ain't coaching.
Quarterback?
It's definitely quarterback.
Oh, that's a given. It's one of them situations.
It's a given, right? Really have to say it? Because, like, people thought Nico was just terrible last year, and we would discuss it privately or on the show. The amount of times where it's just like there was at least 250 yards left out on that field for Nico last year. If he didn't have better quarterback play, you would have saw it.
Mm-hmm.
And he's knocking on the door of 1,000 yards. I think he needs 200 yards to get 1,000 with 5 games left.
Hey, Nico about to get 1,000, bro.
Right? And I know Nick Casario was sitting there in that GM box, kind of like I knew what I was doing.
Remember, traded up for him back in the 3rd round.
Traded up for him. And so, the arrival of CJ has been tremendous for this offense. Defensively, though, last year, the Houston Texans ranked dead last. And if there was 33 teams, Houston would have been 34. They ranked dead last in rushing yards per game last year. 170 yards allowed on the ground.
150 over the last 2 years. Remember that.
150 over the last 2 years. Cody, this year, the Texans ranked 8th in the NFL in rushing yards allowed per game at 95 yards allowed per game. The last 3 games, they have only allowed 90 yards per game on the ground. And when they are away, which is important because they are away against the New York Jets. They are away versus the Tennessee Titans. They are away versus the Indianapolis Colts. So they are away against some teams that can run the ball or have some good running backs. JT Taylor out of Indy, he's hurt for 2 or 3 weeks, so he should be back. But Derrick Henry hasn't necessarily ran the ball well, and the Titans' offensive line isn't good. But away, they've only allowed 86 yards on the ground this year.
That's crazy, man.
You talk about a turnaround, man. You have to mention the improvement of being able to stop the run because it's been bad for Houston. Teams were able to come in the week prior, not run the ball well, but have Houston circled on their schedule because they know they can get some juice going. They've done a hell of a job of stopping the run. And I think that has to speak directly to how this team was put together in the offseason. Like we're hearing a lot of complaints about the lack of sacks, and I understand it. It's 2023. It's a passing league. You want your defensive linemen to be able to bring down a quarterback and get those sacks. That's going to come, but it is kind of like one step at a time, right? And for Houston, the bigger problem for that defensive front or that front seven, it was not getting after the quarterback. The biggest problem was linebackers being out of place on run gaps, missing assignments, not pursuing to the ball carrier,
Not setting
sideline
the
to
edge.
sideline, not setting the edge. A sideline to sideline from the linebackers was piss poor. Defensive tackles getting blown up and pushed, 2 or 3 yards behind the line, in front of the line of scrimmage before the running back gets there. So they got open lanes. It was a lot. This year, in year one, the sack numbers aren't there, but the run stoppage is. And so I think that's probably, outside of getting C.J. Stroud and the domino effect that he's had on this offense, stopping the run has been phenomenal this year for Houston. And it's been great to see them just to watch that growth of just being better, being more dominant, stopping that run. And I've loved it actually, because now I think Houston has a really good foundation on their defensive front. You go into next offseason finding ways, and you close out the next 5 or 6 games, finding ways to get after the quarterback, because now I trust this defense to not allow a lot of these big runs like Houston allowed in the past. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview, to find out, hey, how can you help my small business? I ain't like one of these big businesses running around here and can hire any old body. I need the right people for my job. LinkedIn is where you should go, guys. LinkedIn is above each and every competitor. LinkedIn has tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many qualified candidates, and the quality is top tier. So easy. In fact, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many different hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. That's when they step in. Hey, we got you. You got that hat on. You wearing this hat. We'll wear this hat and make this part of your job, of your life as a small business owner and operator, much easier. Go to LinkedIn.com. Post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That is LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners. Before we close out today's show, Dave Tepper, what are you doing?
I think this is his 5th or 6th head coaching search.
So he owns another team as well, and I think in the last 2 years he's fired between the 2 teams 5 coaches.
Yeah, that's what I saw.
What are you doing? And now you're backtracking. We had a deal worked out with Houston. Let me tell you what Houston came out as. If you're from Houston, you probably know what I mean. Like, Houston has been traditionally known in certain parts of this city as the city of game. And it sounds like the Texans and Nick Caserio, I mean, the more this kind of comes out and the more the Panthers, we get more leaks and Dave Tepper is talking, the more we find out about this information, the more I feel like Nick Caserio is a real G in that, general manager's office. Because it continues to sound like the Texans played them. And if the Texans played them like that, that sounds like they knew who they wanted their quarterback the whole time, right?
Remember, there was that report. I think it was sometime in January, but it was overshadowed by the coaching search. And right when things were starting to get heated up with Coach D'Amico Ryans and Sean Payton at the time, it was like one of those two candidates at the time. Nick Caserio did an interview. I can't remember who he did the interview with or whatever. And he was talking about how much he loved the bigger quarterback. Pause. And remember, we came on this show and was like, is that him saying that he will prefer CJ over Bryce? Now, of course, on the outside looking in, our model. You get one on the other at number 2. But to me, it almost seemed like Nick always wanted CJ if the Texans were to use that number 2 pick on a quarterback.
I don't know, man, but Dave Tepper is a terrible owner. He is terrible. He is god awful. He is. Steve Wilkes should have still been that team's head coach. When the players sat there and told you, basically, we wanted Steve Wilkes. You went against your players. You went out and hired a guy in Frank Wright, and you guys never meshed. It was never a cohesiveness unit between the two. And now you're getting in the media after firing your head coach without allowing him to finish the season, and you're making these excuses. It sounds like Nick Caserio was creeping and crawling and balled it in the mix and played his. And CJ Stroud was the quarterback for Houston the whole time. That's what it sounds like. So listen to me. Don't listen to me. Prestige Worldwide. Thank y'all for listening to this Wednesday episode, Hump Day of the Locked On Texans podcast. Subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans. Follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12. Also, download the Bleacher Report app whenever you get a chance, and find me on Bleacher Report under John Hickman. Do me a favor when you follow me on Twitter. Ask me about the Inland Grove hat and where I got that from. Let's talk. Let's talk out there for a lot of you golfers.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.